Yes, welcome to the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton. Every week, bringing you a conversation with an acknowledged communication expert so that you can boost your business as we do on the Biz Communication Show. And I'm your host, the Biz Communication Guy. Today, we have someone whose skills and a reputation I've known for a long time, and yet, interestingly enough, this is our first collaboration. Talking about Pat Rocchi from the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area. A few comments about him. He's a communications and marketing leader with experience in a wide variety of industries, including healthcare, information technology, and manufacturing. As an MBA, a Master of Education, and a distinguished Toastmaster, he supports organizations with communication and marketing programs, educational seminars, and keynote addresses. He also counsels individuals on presentation skills, which he's very qualified to do. Pat wrote a book, The 6 Ps of Change, which has been published internationally to wide acclaim, receiving many 5-star reviews on Amazon.com, and I'm happy to say one of those was my reviews. Professionally, additionally, he's a manager for marketing and communications with Fresco System USA, the leading producer of flexible packaging. Not only that, he sings, he does stand-up comedy. So much to say about our guest, Pat Rocchi, but we're going to let him talk for himself now. Welcome, Pat.
Thank you, Bill. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And you're right, this is the first time we're collaborating, and I'm thrilled that you chose to include me. You have a wonderful reputation in the field, and I'm so glad to be part of one of your shows. So thanks for inviting me.
You're very kind, and this won't be the only time we collaborate because there's so much communication in the way of communication strategies, tips, and skills that you can share with us that I know we will have you back with us again. Let's start off with something I mentioned, Pat, and that's Toastmasters. You're one of the few people that I've known personally who has excelled in Toastmasters, winning so many regional and I think even national awards. So what I would ask to begin with, and there are many of us who know about Toastmasters and yet we haven't experienced it, what are 2 or 3 of the major learning experiences that you've had from Toastmasters that you think would be beneficial for us to hear about?
Well, Bill, I'm going to begin by saying I am an unabashed supporter of Toastmasters International. It is so helpful for people who either want to get started in public speaking or to augment the skills that they already have. Now, what have I learned? I listen a lot to one of our world champions, a gentleman named Darren LaCroix, whose mantra is stage time, stage time, stage time. You've got to get in front of people as much as possible in order to build those skills. That's one of the reasons I use my voice in so many different ways. I sing, and as part of my singing group, I'm part of a large chorus called the Acapella Pops. We have 30 people on stage at a time singing together, and I'll volunteer to do much of the MC work. So in addition to using my voice for singing, I look for the opportunities there to speak. One thing I learned over the years, people will ask the question, should a speech be written in an outline or word for word? And I say definitely a speech should be written word for word. I believe that very, very strongly, Bill. And the reason is you want to know precisely what you're going to say so you can craft a sentence, so you can get the right words in there to have the full effect. And you only do that by crafting the speech ahead of time. One other practical advantage of that, Bill, is that if you know at which rate you speak, you know how long the speech is going to be. And sometimes somebody will come to you and say, that 10-minute speech, we've run out of time. Can you do 5 minutes? Well, if you take your notes and you know what to excise, you can get it to 5 minutes. Many of Toastmaster competitions are built around timing. If you go a second over the allotted time, you're out of the contest. So you can control that by managing your word count. And then the third thing I would say is try your hand at every type of speaking that Toastmasters offers. You were kind to mention my success in District 38 up in Pennsylvania. We go from the Jersey Shore to the capital of Pennsylvania. It encompasses over 3,000 Toastmasters. And about a year ago, I became the first person in the history of the district to win the championship in all 4 of their contests. Now, those categories are table topics, which is improvisational speaking, a humorous speech contest, an evaluation contest in which you are judged by your ability to evaluate a model speaker, and then the international contest, which is a broad category. It's a 5 to 7 minute speech on any topic you choose. I really encourage people to take advantage of learning how to do all those kinds of speaking, because it pays off for you in life, in the business world and in your personal life.
Excellent. Now, there are a couple of responses I have. One is, I agree with you so much when you say that people who are fearful about speaking, they often create a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that is, they say, I'm afraid to speak. And so they don't speak. And that just creates and accelerates and solidifies the fear. You're exactly right that when we are afraid of any type of challenging experience, and speaking certainly ranks up there highly, do it, and do it in every format that you can. I noticed that you were a radio TV major in college, and you've done comedy, and you've done Toastmasters, and you sing, and as you say, every type of platform and experience that you can get, do it. I'm a very avid golfer, and I've been a golfer since I was 13 years old. I know very well that if I go several weeks without playing, the challenge of that first tee is tougher. And of course, right now in Northeast Georgia, we're in pretty frigid weather, not by Philadelphia standards, but we're not getting to play much golf this week.
Right.
And if I go a few weeks without it, that first tee with your buddies standing around has a lot of challenge. So that, I would agree fully with that. I would also say that you're giving so much attention to your presentations is one reason that you are so accomplished. Interesting to me that you mentioned impromptu speaking. It wasn't long ago that I started coaching a professional leader who said to me, I'm fairly accomplished when I have a prepared speech, but when people call on me on the spot, I stammer, I'm disorganized. And so we worked together on that. We need to know all types of speaking. Now, going back, Pat, to your early days as a speaker, what would you share with us that might have been some of the toughest challenges you had on the way to becoming an award-winning speaker? What were some of those toughest challenges, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I actually discovered that I had some speech impediments that I had to overcome. My voice can be very sibilant. And that's one of the reasons that I advise people to write their speeches out word for word, because I have trouble at times maybe with an S word followed by a TH word. and I stumble, I get tongue-tied. Well, I can recraft the sentence so that those words don't appear in succession, and I find synonyms for them, and I get around it that way. I had a slight stutter that I had to overcome. But the biggest challenge for many speakers is filler words. We have a tendency that if we forget what we have to say, we start to fill it with you know, like, and you know and like are things that drive me up the wall.
Amen.
I cannot stand that. I learned that when I didn't know what I was going to say next, to simply close my mouth, think about it, and then open my mouth again and fight this tendency to try to fill the silence. That was probably the single greatest lesson that I learned. And I I want to acknowledge a good friend of mine named Greg Crayer in the Philadelphia area, who has preceded me at Toastmasters at my first club. And he taught me that. He said, Pat, just close your mouth. And it is advice that I have passed on to the people that I coach.
In addition to the filler words, I often caution people not to use so many of the trite expressions that we use. I find so many newscasters who get into this, and I guess they just don't get the coaching they need. One of my pet peeves is when somebody says in a speech or a broadcast, to be honest with you. And I'm thinking, you mean you got to tell me?
Yeah, really. What are you saying the rest of the time?
Yeah.
The other thing is, well, at the end of the day,
when all is said and done,
oh my goodness, yes.
You and I could spend quite a while talking about these cliches, but the filler words and the cliches, which it's so easy for us to fall into, stay away from them. I would imagine that as you have developed as a speaker, not only hearing yourself, but seeing yourself on video has been beneficial.
Yes. You can identify some verbal tics. I find that it's the visual that I often have to work on if I've seen myself on video. Extraneous motion, pointless use of my hands. I give people this advice all the time. Move with purpose. Emphasize the point you want to make by using your body. We all know from old movies that when in the old Westerns, when we saw the migration to the West, the people on the screen always moved from screen right to screen left, because that's where East and West are to our eyes. We know intuitively what movement means. So use the body to take your listener to a different place. Don't tell them, transport them, take them with you, and use your hands. I know right now that I have a very small vista on this camera, so if I want to hold the world in my hands, I should do it here. Whereas if I were on a stage, I can gesticulate more broadly. You have to know your environment. You speak differently to a group of 15 than you do to a group of 3,000.
One of the things I've often said is that the camera does not lie. And that's why it's so wonderful. And I do this certainly with all my coaching clients, and I'm sure you do with yours, is to have them see themselves on video. I remember so well, gosh, I think it was about 12 years ago, I had an opportunity to present 4 one-hour programs for an organization. And they said, this was back in the days of videotape. They said, do you mind if we videotape these? I said, just under one condition, that I can get a copy of those tapes,
Right.
which I did. So when I got back to my office a day or two later, I spent a good bit of time going through those 4 hours with one purpose: to see what I might find that was deficient and how I could improve it. Pat, I found mannerisms and movements that I had no idea that I was doing. And the significant thing about it is, if something looks awkward once, well, that's okay. Nobody will pay much attention to it. But if you've got a repetitive motion that you don't even know about, here's where the camera really comes in handy. It can be very powerful, not as a here's what you're doing wrong, but on here's what I can improve.
And they become part of your personality, and a good impressionist will pick this up and use it. I heard Rich Little say that the average celebrity has about 5 or 6 tells, different motions that they use. One of the reasons he was so successful in imitating Johnny Carson was that Johnny Carson had well over 100 different physical characteristics that he had. All you had to do was do this, the straightening of the tie. It can work with, if you become as big as Johnny Carson, it can work in your favor. But most of us don't get that big and becomes merely annoying. So you really should control them. I totally agree with you. It is very, very important to see yourself as much as possible.
You're twitching the tie like that reminds me of Rodney Dangerfield.
Yeah, I can't get no respect.
and when you mention Johnny Carson and Rich Little, I've seen, as many people have, Rich Little's imitation of Johnny Carson, yes, and it is spot on. I was a very big Johnny Carson fan. Watching Rich Little imitate him is comedy and showmanship at its best. Absolutely. Pat, time for one more question. Who are model speakers who are in the public eye that you respect and admire and would hold up as a role model? Maybe somebody our viewers and listeners on podcasts would know.
Well, I find that the two fields of endeavor that I turn to find good speakers are, number one, politicians, and number two, people of faith. One of my favorite speakers of all time was the late governor of New York, Mario Cuomo. I would encourage anybody to try to go back and find his keynote speeches to the various Democratic conventions where he could enthrall the audience with his command of language, the authority of his voice, and his physical bearing. Another person I enjoy a great deal today is Joel Osteen. I find he's engaging, he's accessible, he's friendly. I want to listen to him. He tells stories very well. He uses third-person stories, things that happen to other people, and also first-person stories. I enjoy him very much, and I'll try to catch him on television as much as I can. But those are the people. We'll always have the gold standard of Ronald Reagan, who, as an actor, and I don't say that to diminish him, and he used his oratorical skills to great benefit in moving the nation. And one last thing is, for those of us who like to speak, try to see the movie The Darkest Hour, in which Gary Oldman does a remarkable job of evoking Winston Churchill, because in that movie they have excerpts from Churchill's 3 greatest speeches in which he encouraged England to get into Second World War.
I saw that movie about 2 weeks ago, The Darkest Hour, as a former speech prof, as a person with graduate degrees in speech communication, as a speech coach, and as a professional speaker, I have to say that closing speech in that movie is so stirring that you feel what the audience must have felt at that time, and you want to stand and applaud as Parliament did. Pat, believe me, this has been absolutely fascinating. In fact, I'll say, to be honest with you, Pat.
Well, at the end of the day, Bill, your opinion means a lot to me.
When all is said and done, yes, indeed. Pat, thank you so much for being with us on the Biz Communication Show. I know there are many people who would like your contact information, both those who have watched us on video and those who've listened to our podcast. So please tell us how we can get in touch with you.
You can get in touch with me. My email is my name, PATROCCHI @comcast.net, or you can call me at 610-909-7922. You can also find me on the web at either patrocchi.com or patrocchicommunications.com.
Thank you, Pat. And now that Pat has given his contact information, I will share mine. As the Biz Communication Guy, my website is B-I-Z, bizcommunicationguy.com. I invite you to go there, check my services for corporations and for business leaders. Sign up for my newsletter as well. Thank you again, those of you who have joined us on video and those on podcast. Next week, we will bring you another outstanding communication expert who can help us build our sales, our motivation, our leadership, our customer service, and yes, our profits. Pat Rocchi, thank you again. Any closing words?
Find your strength as a speaker. That's what I encourage all of my clients to do, whether it's in your voice or in your mannerism. Find that and capitalize it so that you can be yourself and not like everybody else.
Well said. Thanks again. Look forward to having you with us next week.